Listen, folks, I've been thinking a lot about Islam lately, not just as a religion, not just as a cultural phenomenon, but as a force in the world that we in America really need to understand if we're going to make sense of the times we live in. I mean, think about it. How many of us can really claim we understand Islam beyond the headlines, beyond the fear-mongering, beyond the stereotypes? People see it and they panic. They see Muslims and they assume the worst. They see the history and they focus on conflict. But there's so much more to unpack here. I've traveled. I've met people. I've talked to scholars. And let me tell you, Islam is not a monolith. It's diverse. It's nuanced. And it has this deep philosophical and spiritual framework that demands respect, even if you don't practice it yourself. And yet, here we are in America, a country that prides itself on freedom. Yet we have this blind spot when it comes to understanding one of the largest religions on earth. I think the truth is we're all scared of what we don't understand, and that fear has been exploited politically for decades. People talk about Islam like it's some mysterious foreign threat, but it's not foreign, it's human, it's global. It asks about millions of people living, loving, working, raising families, contributing to society just like anyone else. And history is messy, sure. And Islam has a history like every other major religion, but focusing only on conquest and conflict is a failure of imagination. There's science, there's art, there's philosophy, there's charity and community building in Islamic history that we never get taught in school. And I think we need to start asking ourselves, why are we shocked? Why are we so caught off guard every time we hear something about Islam that challenges our preconceptions? The truth is, America is in shock, not because Islam is dangerous, but because we've never really tried to understand it, and understanding is uncomfortable, right? It forces us to confront our biases. It forces us to question our assumptions. It forces us to admit that maybe we don't have all the answers. But that's the point of knowledge, isn't it? To open your mind, to challenge yourself, to seek the truth even when it's inconvenient, even when it conflicts with everything you've been told. And Islam offers a perspective, a worldview, a way of thinking about life, community, morality, and purpose that is profound. If you actually take the time to look at it without fear, without prejudice. I'm not here to tell you to convert or to pick a side. I'm here to say, wake up, America. Wake up to the fact that millions of your fellow humans are being misrepresented and misunderstood. And it's your responsibility to see beyond the headlines. And maybe if we do that, maybe if we start listening instead of judging, learning instead of mocking, we'll find that the values we share are stronger than the differences we fear. Because at the end of the day, it's about human beings, it's about justice, it's about compassion, it's about trying to make the world a little less ignorant and a little more connected. And that, my friends, is the truth about Islam that nobody wants to admit. And that's why America is in shock. And let me tell you something else, because here's the kicker. People love to simplify Islam into sound bites, like it's just a headline, like it's just a news story, but it's a living, breathing faith with billions of followers and billions of stories that are never told. I've met people, ordinary people, not scholars, not activists, who practice Islam every day, quietly, humbly, trying to live good lives, raising kids, running businesses, teaching, helping their neighbors, and yet they get painted with the same broad brush that politicians and media pundits have been using for decades. And that's part of the shock, isn't it? The shock isn't just about Islam. The shock is about how little we've actually paid attention to real human beings. And think about the media we consume. Every time there's conflict in the Middle East, every time a terrorist act happens somewhere, people immediately say, look, Islam, and that's it. No nuance, no context, no history, no understanding of geopolitics, no understanding of why these things happen. We're spoon-fed fear and we swallow it whole, and that's a tragedy. It's a tragedy for Americans, it's a tragedy for Muslims, and it's a tragedy for the truth. And the more I learn, the more I realize that Islam has principles, deep ethical teachings, frameworks for justice, charity, responsibility, and humility that are just as relevant today as they were 1,400 years ago. But we don't hear about that in school. We don't see that on TV, and we certainly don't talk about it at dinner tables. And I think that ignorance creates a vacuum that fear rushes into. People get scared, they get defensive, they get angry, and then they act out of that fear rather than reason. And let's be honest, this isn't just about religion. This is about culture. This is about identity. This is about America trying to understand a global world that moves faster than our ability to digest it. Islam is a global force, not a threat. It's a civilization, not a crisis. And if we fail to see it that way, we are failing ourselves. And here's something that really gets me. How often do we hear from voices inside Islam that are moderate, progressive, reformist, working to build bridges, working to create dialogue, working to fight extremism from within? Rarely. And that's because the stories we get told are the ones that shock, the ones that scare, the ones that confirm our biases. And I think that's where the real danger lies, not in Islam itself, but in our inability to face it with honesty and empathy. And I want America to wake up, truly wake up to the fact that Islam is more than headlines, more than politics, more than fear. It's about people. It's about ethics. It's about trying to do right in a world that constantly challenges you to do wrong. And until we acknowledge that, until we educate ourselves, until we seek to understand instead of judge, we will remain in shock. Shocked by what? Shocked by our own ignorance. And the truth is, we can change that. We can start by listening, by reading, by talking to people, by traveling, by opening our minds instead of closing our hearts. Because once you start seeing the richness, the depth, the beauty, the wisdom, you realize the fear was always unnecessary. And that, my friends, is the next level of truth about Islam. The truth that most Americans are too afraid to face, the truth that challenges every assumption you've ever held, and the truth that has the power to change how we see the world if we have the courage to confront it. And now, if we're really going to go deeper, let's talk about something most people won't touch: why Islam makes Americans uncomfortable. It's not just about fear, it's about reflection. Because when you start really looking at the teachings, the history, the philosophy, you realize it asks questions we're not used to asking ourselves. It asks us to think about morality beyond convenience, to consider justice not just as a legal framework, but as a way of life, to understand charity as a duty rather than an optional act of kindness, to recognize community as something that binds us together instead of something we take for granted. And that's uncomfortable for a culture that's been conditioned to think of freedom as doing whatever we want, whenever we want, without accountability. Islam challenges that. It challenges the notion that life is only about individualism, that success is only about accumulation, that morality is subjective. And when people in America see that, they react with shock because it doesn't fit into the narrative they've been told, that freedom means freedom from rules, that spirituality is optional, that morality is negotiable. And yet, here's the paradox. Millions of Muslims around the world are thriving under a system that demands discipline, that encourages reflection, that provides a framework for meaning, and they do it without violence, without oppression, without fanaticism. And the media doesn't show that. Hollywood doesn't show that. Political pundits don't show that. So what happens? People imagine the worst. They invent a caricature of Islam and they fight against that instead of engaging with reality. And that's why America is in shock, because reality is far more nuanced, far more complex, far more human than we're willing to admit. And let me give you an example. Think about art, science, literature, the contributions of Islamic civilization to mathematics, medicine, astronomy, philosophy. They shape the very foundation of the modern world. Algebra, optics, hospitals, universities, libraries, all of it was built, preserved, and innovated by Muslim scholars centuries ago. And yet, how often do we learn about that? How often do we give credit where it's due? Instead, we focus on conflict, conquest, and controversy, and that selective memory creates a distorted lens, a lens that makes people panic, a lens that makes people suspicious, a lens that makes them shocked when they see Muslims thriving peacefully, building businesses, raising families, contributing to society. And let's be honest, Islam isn't perfect. No religion is. No civilization is. But to reduce it to a threat, to reduce it to a stereotype, to reduce it to something scary, that's ignorance, and ignorance is the real enemy here. And so what I'm asking America to do, what I'm challenging America to do, is to look beyond fear. Look beyond headlines. Look beyond the politicians and the talking heads who profit from division. Look at the people, look at the culture, look at the values, look at the depth, and start asking yourself, why am I shocked? What am I missing? What haven't I tried to understand? Because once you start asking those questions, once you start seeking the truth, you realize that Islam is not something to fear. It's something to learn from. It's something to engage with. It's a mirror that forces us to reflect on our own society, our own morals, our own priorities. And when we do that, when we confront the truth instead of avoiding it, when we choose curiosity over fear, understanding over judgment, empathy over prejudice, that's when the shock begins to fade. That's when real dialogue begins. That's when America stops being shocked and starts being enlightened. And that, my friends, is the power of truth, the power of facing reality. The power of opening your mind to ideas that challenge you, to people who are different, to history that doesn't fit neatly into your narrative. That's what Islam offers the world. That's what understanding Islam offers America. And that's why when we finally allow ourselves to look, listen, and learn, the shock isn't a tragedy. It's a wake-up call, and it's the beginning of something transformative, something profound, something that could change not just how we see Islam, but how we see ourselves, how we see our communities, and how we see the world.